In Africa and around the world, school bells are finally ringing for students to return to classrooms. For over 18 months, nearly 77 million children worldwide were out of classrooms, according to a recent report from the United Nations Children's Fund. And more than 131 million students in 11 countries had no access to in-person schooling. Across Eastern and Southern Africa, it is estimated that 40% of all children are currently not in school at all due to COVID-19 closures. The World Health Organization said last year that the difficult decision to encourage governments to reopen schools amid a pandemic was a necessary one to avoid adversities such as teenage pregnancies, child abuse, substance abuse, anxiety, loneliness, just to name a few. Meanwhile, a new school year is underway, but the threats of COVID-19 continues. Hello, I'm Oriani Tangishaka, and this is Our Voices. On today's program, we'll take a look at some of the safety measures put in place as children return to classrooms as the Delta variant surges during this COVID-19 pandemic. We'll look at how governments, educators, parents, and students are confronting the challenges of the new normal crafted by the deadly disease. And we'll examine other challenges in some academic systems on the continent, such as teacher strikes. Let's begin. The Somali government reopened schools this month despite a new wave of COVID-19 infections. As Mohammed Shiknu reports from Mogadishu, there are some concerns on whether measures to prevent the virus spreading in the classrooms and beyond is sufficient. Let's take a look.
Early morning in a Mogadishu school, and students arrive to prepare for the day's activities. None of the students are wearing masks as they mingle, even though the country is experiencing a new wave of COVID-19 infections. Khadija Adam is the principal responsible for the day-to-day running of the institution. She has a daunting task ahead, trying to keep her students safe while in school.
We keep reminding our students about good sanitation. The students understand that they must wash hands. We lobbied the Ministry of Education and they have supported us with hand-washing facilities. We normally instill in students that it is compulsory to sanitize their hands and wear masks, as this will enable schools to remain open.
In Somalia, uptake for COVID-19 vaccines remains low. The most vulnerable are the elderly, and there is fear school reopening might increase infections among the students who will ultimately expose their families. Abdifatah Muhyiddin is a student at the school and fears for his older relatives.
I am really worried about the coronavirus as it has returned and reached its peak. I'm concerned about the health of my family since school has reopened, and I might get infected in school and take the virus back to my family.
The prolonged closure of schools due to the pandemic had a negative impact on the lives of young Somalis. There was a significant increase in school dropouts, and this disrupted the social and economic well-being of families. Abdifatah Mahmoud is a trader in Mogadishu, and after a hard day's work, finds time in the evening to mentor his two teenage daughters, hoping they will catch up on lost time.
The long lockdown negatively impacted education. Some girls disappointed with education got married and started families. Boys who dropped out became either touts on passenger vehicles or migrated to other places. The length of the lockdown really affected education.
Mohammed Abi, Director General of Somalia's Ministry of Education, acknowledges the hardships.
One of the principal side effects of the coronavirus on education is that even the few students who showed resilience to continuing with education performed poorly during exams. Performance was below average, unlike any other time in the past. The quality of education went down, and some schools had to close down.
When it announced the reopening of schools, Somalia's Ministry of Education promised preventive measures were in place to ensure learning returns to normal. Students are required to wear face masks and maintain social distancing, among other measures. However, not all of these preventive measures are being followed, as seen in the Mogadishu school. Mohamed Sheikh Noor for WEWE News, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Here in the United States, students are returning to class for a new school year, just as the number of Delta variant of COVID cases are on the rise. Experts say that children seem to be vulnerable to this variant, raising questions about how to protect them, especially those who are too young to be vaccinated.
Since the coronavirus pandemic hit the U.S., over 36 million Americans have been infected, about 4 million of them children, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. After a relatively calm few months, the Delta variant is causing new surge of cases, just as children are returning to class for the new school year. Dr. William Raska is with the University of Vermont Medical Center.
Nobody under the age of 12 has been immunized. So by definition, there's a huge susceptible population.
The most difficult situation, experts say, can be seen in the South, where vaccination rates are low and the Delta variant is spreading especially fast. Also, a number of governors in states such as Florida, Texas, and Arizona have banned mask mandates, although some school districts reportedly are defying those orders.
If schools go into the school year without masking and stay unmasked from, say, September to December, they will infect most of the kids that attend school. It's that transmissible. It's much more transmissible than it was last year.
Dr. Danny Benjamin, a distinguished professor of pediatrics at Duke University, participated in 3 studies looking at the impact of face masks on the spread of COVID-19 in schools.
And we studied over 1 million children and adults this past spring with no distancing, 3 children to a bus seat, schools open full time for everyone. And again, the chance of a child infecting somebody else at school if they came to school with COVID was 1% or less.
But those who oppose face mask mandates argue such orders violate their freedom and that wearing a face mask is a matter of personal choice and responsibility. Many others have expressed distrust of the government and its claims the vaccines are safe. Meanwhile, experts say getting more people vaccinated is key to controlling the virus.
If we vaccinate the community, then the schools are safe. And then when the schools open, obviously we should try to vaccinate all our children age 12 and older. They're still not well vaccinated.
With the fast spread of the Delta variant, the American Academy of Pediatrics has already encouraged healthcare regulators to approve the use of COVID vaccines for children aged 5 to 11 as soon as possible. And approval is not expected for a few more months. Daria Digoods for VOA News, Washington.
Now, to discuss the current situation and students returning to school, I spoke to Dr. Emery Rangwa, a public health expert and a senior HIV and AIDS advisor for the U.S. Agency for International Development. I began asking her about the role of governments.
I believe safety in general should be part of the government process anyway. But if it's not already, safety measures such as who drops off the children, what time they are dropped off, who hands off to who, those are things that now more than ever should be looked into with more attention than before. In terms of COVID-19 specific measures, those include face covering, social distancing, hand washing, hand sanitizers. And in addition to that, I believe government should also have in place a tracing mechanism. They should know or have at least standard operating procedures on when they have a case, what to do with it, how they follow up to make sure that the index case and the contacts are all isolated for at least 10 days to prevent contamination or spread of the disease.
In your experience with work related to human behavior, do you worry that children are being impacted deeply because of the lack of interactions, because of social distancing measures and so forth, and what their future will look like, and what can be done to mitigate such things?
Yes, the lockdown and the reduced social interaction created by COVID has caused mental challenges to all of us. But children and teenagers has had especially a rough time coping emotionally. I believe first and foremost, parents and guardians need to know how to talk to the children, do frequent check-in with the children. The second thing that can be done also is to recognize the signs of stress. You'll see different behavior from different children, but there's some common stress signs that can be recognized easily. Those are change in behavior, change in mood. For the toddler, the little ones, they can regress to previous behavior, such as if they were already potty trained, they can go back to wetting themselves. If you recognize those signs of stress, you can organize for the child to be supported in terms of more social interaction with everybody that is around. But if it goes to more stressful behavior such as depression or even a lot of anxiety, pediatrician or even doctors can be there to provide additional support.
Awesome. You also mentioned nutrition, which is very important in environments where food is scarce and food is very expensive. What is your advice to parents in what they can do to try to strengthen their children's immune system as they go back into schools in order for them to fight diseases and, of course, COVID?
As we know, for a strong and resilient immune system to develop, there's more than just food availability that is needed. Parent and guardian will need to have basic knowledge about optimal nutrition, the food or meal prep that will give the children all the ingredients that they need, all the nutrients that they need for their immune system to be strong. So in this case, quality matters a lot rather than quantity. Something else that can be done in terms of nutrition, if we look at countrywide or government-wide, it'll be important for governments to have demographic data about the families that need their support. Where are the poor families located? How much do they have, even before the pandemic? And last but not least, physical activity, social interactions, those should be maintained throughout this time to boost the child's immune system and health in general.
From India to Indonesia, Israel to Mexico, students worldwide are returning to classrooms after more than a year of the COVID-19 pandemic. But government guidelines are changing many classroom traditions. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
The new academic year started with new pandemic guidelines for schools across the globe. Students are getting temperature checks, must have clean hands, wear masks, and in some places, don face shields. In Israel, students were tested at the start of school.
All of the kids in our school performed the quick test, the antigen test. It's not mandatory, but it's something that we ask the parents to collaborate with us. So hopefully we can start the year with everybody being healthy and safe.
So we did the home COVID test and it was negative, so it was good. But I had a problem with my big boy. He was afraid of it very much. And I said, I'll do it to you, don't worry, everything will be fine. So it took a while to convince him.
In Mexico, thousands of schools have opened their doors in a nation with more than 30 million students. Protocols in Mexico include masks, temperature checks, and washing with hand sanitizer. Students are heading back to school after closures last year affected some 660 million students, according to the World Health Organization.
Children have been affected significantly, both in terms of their educational attainment and progress, particularly, for example, younger children who have been delayed in their reading and literacy progress.
Students have also been impacted by the lack of socialization.
In fact, we are quite concerned about the mental health impact that this has had on children, and two of the advisory groups that we have set up since the beginning of the year in our region are on mental health and on schooling.
The French government called for caution as 12 million students return to school this month.
The back-to-school season can lead to a renewal of the epidemic, so we have to be particularly careful. And this also requires us to continue the vaccination campaign because the vaccine remains an important tool in our ability to get through the crisis in the most sustainable manner possible.
In Indonesia, school bells are ringing again, but government guidelines have changed some things. Talking in class is not allowed, face masks must be worn, and teachers must be vaccinated. Indian authorities have given the green light to partially reopen more schools with health measures in place throughout September. Some education experts say the virus risk to children remain low and stress the need for children to return to school, particularly poorer students who face more challenges due to classes online. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
It's time for a quick break, but first we have several questions for parents. How do you feel about sending your children back to classroom for in-person learning in the midst of a pandemic? What are your concerns, fears, and challenges? How do you feel about the possibilities of your children contracting COVID-19? And finally, what about the strict rules on social interactions in schools? Please share your comments and your views on our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is at VOA Our Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. Our number is right there on your screen. When we return, going back to school during a pandemic isn't the only worries for children returning to classrooms. In places like Zimbabwe and Cameroon, teacher strikes and school fees are also major challenges. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Today we're discussing the challenges and solutions in the education systems as students go back to classroom during a pandemic. In Zimbabwe, the country resumed in-class teaching this week, but thousands of teachers are protesting a lack of personal protective equipment and say they will not go back to class until the government addresses their concerns over the COVID-19 pandemic. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
Zimbabwe's amalgamated rural teachers union says it will only call off their strike when the government addresses their concerns. These include salaries that are below the poverty level and the lack of personal protective equipment against COVID-19.
And there's negligence on the part of the responsible authority to make sure that there's enough safety to guarantee our learners and our teachers from the pandemic. They should have been providing water, adequate water supply, enough PPEs.
Some students have been going to school since Monday to try learn among themselves as there are no teachers. The teachers union warns that classrooms may turn into super spreaders of COVID-19. But Zimbabwe's government says it has been working to ensure classrooms are safe.
We have been putting in place new infrastructure to ensure that we decongest the existing infrastructure to ensure that there is social and physical distancing for the prevention and management of COVID-19. We have also made sure that our schools have got adequate supplies of sanitizers and water.
UNICEF Zimbabwe, which welcomes school reopening, says it has been helping students and government during the COVID-19 lockdown.
The two key approaches were, one, looking at how we can support the loss of learning as a result of the school closure. The second one was looking at how to keep the schools safe and ready and prepared for children to return and go back to school.
Zimbabwe teachers hope such organizations can assist the government and supply the resources they require, adequate PPEs and salaries which allow them to live above the poverty line. Columbus Mavungam for VOA News, Harare.
Students in Cameroon returned to school on September 6, but controversy erupted over the compulsory payment of membership fees to the parents' associations in public schools. These fees are known in Cameroon as the API fees. The amount required for this year differ from one establishment to another on the basis of any regulatory text signed by the authorities. Civil society is in uproar over the measure, which it claims violates the right to education. Our correspondent Emmanuel Jurentap reports from Yaoundé.
In this Yaoundé high school, the bulletin board displays the controversial note of the compulsory nature of the Parents' Association fees before any enrollment in a school. For several days now, this head of an association for the promotion and defense of human rights has denounced this measure.
In view of the economic situation, it is out of the question today that we find ourselves in a public school and that a parent is told that he will pay the API of 20,000 francs. Sometimes upwards, it's 30,000, sometimes it's 40,000, 45,000 CFA francs. And the problem in all of this is that the parents are not aware of the time or day when these amounts are fixed.
The headmaster of the school here, in an interview, declined to comment on the note in question, despite our insistence. With the parent-student community, there is no unanimous support for the compulsory nature of the API fees.
API fees are to pay for school benches, blackboards, chalk, but in the list of school supplies, chalk is required. I have paid for chalk for my children since Friday. Where is the API money?
La craie, oui. Moi, j'ai payé la craie. J'ai payé la craie pour mes enfants. Ils parlent depuis vendredi. On m'a demandé de payer la craie, mais où est-ce que va l'argent d'APE?
At the same time, it is quite true that these costs are included in it. I am not too interested, but I obey the conditions that are imposed.
6 years ago, the director of New Human Rights sounded the alarm bells in this investigative report.
The Nkombisong High School, where my child was, is 3,500 students, and it was 30,500 francs DAP per student. Maybe when you deal with these subjects, you do not know what you're talking about. We are talking about huge sums of money per high school.
Since 1990, the membership regime for associations has been optional in Cameroon. Human Rights Freedom Movement, seized by the correspondence of the President of the Republic and the responsible ministers.
For this year, we are collecting data, and in the days to come, we will file a complaint against several principals and their accomplices and members of the Office of Parents Association API for their violation of the right to education.
Education officials have so far made no statement on the controversy that is causing the local press to fuss.
It's time for another short break. When we come back, Simengeshi Okoye will bring you a supersonic mother in Uganda. This mom started an online science, technology, engineering, and math club for her son's class. She's in our Women to Watch segment today. Stay with us.
We're bringing women's voices to the conversation, and more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment.
Here in Kinshasa, campaigns to raise awareness against the spread of coronavirus are common, but getting that information to people who have no access to water, electricity, or money can be a challenge.
We are here at Kalerwe Market, Uganda, Kampala, where in this whole market, women are crying out for their situations to change.
For women, it will be better for us.
I think a big thing for me is just being able to say that when these protests are happening, does it turn around into policy?
Our kids are raped every single day.
This movement got the governments to listen. It really was powerful because it showed what is possible when men and women band together and say, enough is enough.
It's not necessary anymore to climb on a car. I can be in any place to cheer with the people.
Welcome back. It's time now for our Women to Watch segment. Our voices, Simenesh Yakoye has this week's segment.
Thanks, Orion, and hello, everyone.
On this week's Women to Watch segment, I'm going to introduce you to a Ugandan mother who created an online STEAM club during lockdown. And now they are going supersonic.
Mother of two Shamim Wanesha didn't want ongoing lockdowns to ground the sky-high ambitions of some of Uganda's children. Just before schools were closed across the East African nation, she founded the Supersonic Aviators. The club aims to keep children engaged and develop their interests in subjects like coding, aviation, space, and climate change.
Look at your browser.
And it's especially focused on girls such as Rachel Amuron.
I hope that one day I'll be able to discover biofuels which planes can use instead of fossil fuels which damage the environment.
Just 16% of Africa's more than 1 billion people use the internet, according to the International Telecommunication Union.
How to save a website.
But coding skills open up a world of job opportunities.
Click the file.
Analysts also say technological innovation is a quick way to promote lasting economic growth and development across the continent.
We learn different languages. For example, we learn HTML, JavaScript, and CSS.
Wanesha was inspired to learn herself after her 7-year-old son expressed an interest in coding and aviation. He became a sensation in Uganda for his impressive aircraft knowledge and budding flying skills. His mother used her own savings to start the Supersonic Aviators. It mainly caters to underprivileged children who do not have internet access. Classes are free of charge.
We do flight experiences, we do camp aviation, we assemble aircrafts, they watch movies about space to motivate them, they took presentations. This has enabled them to be creative.
There are currently 25 supersonic aviators, ranging in age from 6 to the late teens. But there are challenges. Restrictions mean lessons have to take place outside her compound. Wanesha says it's sometimes too hot or it rains. With the length of Uganda's strict lockdown unclear, she's taken the club's activities online, determined that her students can keep aiming for the stars.
Thanks to Manish, and that's where we end our show this week. Thank you to my colleagues on Our Voices, and on behalf of everyone at the Voice of America, I'm Oriani Tangishaka. Stay safe.
Mamlaka ya Maendeleo ya Biashara Tanzania kupitia Wizara ya Viwanda na Biashara kwa kushirikiana na Chama cha Wasindikaji wa Mafuta ya Alizeti Tanzania TASUPA inaandaa msafara wa kibiashara kwa wasindikaji wa mafuta ya alizeti kuelekea nchi ya Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo DRC katika mji wa Lubumbashi kuanzia tarehe 1 Oktoba hadi tarehe 5 Oktoba 2021. Msafara huu umefadhiliwa na Jumuiya ya Maendeleo ya Kusini mwa Afrika SADC kupitia mradi wa SADC EU TRF. Tunawaalika wasindikaji wenye uwezo wa kuhudumia soko la DRC.
Wekeza katika uzalishaji wa alizeti. Jenga uchumi wa Tanzania. Twenzetu Lubumbashi.